Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin. Today, my dear friends, I'd like to focus on the Budapest Summit, specifically what to expect from the Budapest Summit between President Putin and President Trump, but most importantly, to focus on the interpretations. The word is abuzz with all kinds of speculations, explanations, and here I would like to put my 5 cents worth of explaining what is going on. Now, first I'd like to congratulate myself on predicting it right. In my preceding video, I mentioned that there wouldn't be any Tomahawk missiles. I also said that Putin knew that there wouldn't be any, and that is why his reaction was so mild by simply saying that if there were some, it would ruin Russian relations. So that sort of confirms me in the way that I saw the situation develop, and in a sense that there was a deal and there was an understanding between President Trump and President Putin all along from the Alaska meeting, and it continues now. So let me explain what I think is happening in this context. And I'd like to answer today just 3 questions. What does President Trump want in terms of the Russia policy, and what does he want to accomplish or achieve in Budapest? The second question is, what does Putin want in this meeting? Why is he going to Budapest, and what to expect there? And the third one is concerning Zelensky. What are President Zelensky's options now that he was effectively thrown under the bus at the Washington meeting with President Trump? So let me focus on all 3 and offer my interpretation of what is happening and what to expect from Budapest. Now, I start with President Trump, and it seems to me that one has to interpret Trump's actions in view of his domestic policies and his domestic situation. And the domestic situation is that he does not want to be portrayed as Putin's puppet, as Putin's man, as some of his opponents have been doing, and especially the Democrats. And I think he took it very hard when they were trying to put Russia labels on him in impeachment and so on during the years of Biden. So that is why he's occasionally making all kinds of pronouncements. Oh, I'm sick of Putin's this and that. And he's beginning to say, oh, I'm disappointed with Putin. Oh, I'm going to give Tomahawks. Now it seems to be absolutely clear that he never meant any Tomahawks, that this whole idea of Tomahawks was just a diplomatic move to make it appear as if he is supporting Zelensky and the war in Ukraine on Ukrainian terms. In fact, it seems like there were the beginnings of a agreement between him and Putin back in Alaska, and that they've finalized the major contours of that agreement in the last conversation they had a couple of days ago. They spoke 2.5 hours, and then they decided to meet in Budapest. That suggests, I think, logically, that they agreed on something. And they obviously both say that they're not going to reveal what they agreed on, but they agreed to meet. And it wouldn't be just to, slap each other on the shoulder and say, nice to meet you again. It has to have some outcome, and I will come back to what it could be later. But here's what it seems to me is obvious in terms of Trump's Russia policy. And that has to be seen in a wider context. On the one hand, it is connected with his domestic agenda not to be listed as Putin's stooge. On the other hand, it has to do with his European policy, and that is that he is sick and tired of the European loafers, and especially of the globalists in Europe. And it seems to me that going to Budapest is his way of helping Viktor Orban and also those people in Europe that oppose the globalists and that want to use the United States for their purposes, especially in the war in Ukraine. He has been resisting that all along. He's been saying to the Europeans, you want to fight? Go ahead. You want to put your forces? Go ahead, but not us. You want to impose sanctions on China? Fine, that's great. But you do it first, and then do we. You want to strengthen NATO? You pay 5% first. And when they said, well, yes, we will, but 10 years later, it seems to me that Trump is actually saying to the Europeans, now you can do it yourself, and we're not going to waste any more money on the Ukraine war as a minimum, but as a maximum it would be nice for it to stop. And I don't think it's because he's so much pitying lives of Russian and Ukrainian soldiers or civilians. He doesn't seem to care that much about the lives of civilians in Gaza. I think it's that he wants to reorient American policy to the Far East, to China. China is a big economy growing to challenge the United States, or not even to challenge, but compete with the United States. And the priority is for Trump. Let the Europeans take care of Europe. If they want to get involved in the European war, that's fine, but not with the United States. Ideally, he would like to stop the war in Ukraine on conditions that are a compromise, which means respecting some of the gains that Russia has made in Donbass. And it seems to me that that is his motivation to strengthen his supporters' position in Europe, Orban, Meloni, and others, to weaken the globalists, to stop the war, and get himself a mantle of the peacemaker. I think that are his objectives in going for the Budapest Summit. Now, let's go to Putin's objectives. His objectives, of course, are to have his 4 provinces and the neutral status for Ukraine and the no NATO membership of Ukraine. In other words, Russian conditions have not changed at all. He keeps repeating the same conditions. And last time when he voiced those, it was, I think, Vice President Vance who said Russia wants too much. Well, now Putin kind of goes back to the same topic 3 months later and he can say to Vice President Vance, well, it ain't so much anymore because we're on the verge of taking Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka, and there are 2 cities remaining in Donbass that are not Russian control yet, and that is Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. But the Russians have moved a lot since then, and they're closing in on establishing full control over Donbass, perhaps within a month or 2. In other words, the military situation has shifted dramatically in Russia's favor. And that seems to strengthen Putin's claim to these provinces. But that's not all. It seems to me that one has to be aware of the domestic situation in Russia, which Putin is obviously, he's very, very experienced in these matters, has to pay attention to, which is, in Russian history, there was a moment which is known by every school boy and girl, which is called Pochabny Mir, which means shameful, disgraceful peace. And that is in relation to the peace treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918, when Germany basically claimed victory in World War I over Russia. and it annexed the entire Ukraine, the entire Belarus, and the Baltic countries. This was the price Russia had to pay for its defeat. Now, this peace, of course, didn't last long, because in November 1918, World War I was over, with the Western Allies defeating Kaiser Germany, and this Brest-Litovsk peace collapsed. But the memory of a shameful peace remained, and that is why Putin cannot come back from Budapest in a position of a shameful peace. In other words, he does not want to be accused that he gave away Russia's peace, Russia's victory, for a piece of paper with Trump, and therefore it has to be acceptance of Putin's plan. Neutral status for Ukraine, respect for Russian Orthodox Church, respect for Russian minority and the Russian language, and a regime change. To achieve these goals with Zelensky is impossible. Everybody knows this. So the regime change is on the table, but they cannot come and say, hey, Zelensky, just get out of the picture. So why are they going? It seems to me that Putin's plan for Budapest is to restate Russian conditions with the support of Trump, and they will come out with some kind of a memorandum which is similar to the memorandum of 1996, which confirmed Ukraine's status as a neutral power. And there's a certain symbolism in the new meeting in Budapest, and everyone familiar with the subject remembers the meeting of 1996, which was a result of an international agreement that Ukraine gives up its nuclear weapons. Actually, it's not theirs, but it was Soviet nuclear weapons that remained on Ukraine territory in exchange for neutrality status and recognition of its borders. But it didn't specify that it could join NATO, and when it tried to join NATO, the Donbas provinces seceded, Russia intervened to support them, and this is the origin of this war. So Putin cannot afford that. So I think what to expect from this meeting is a declaration of intent, and Zelensky would have to either reject it or accept it. And that is, let me now say a few words about his domestic position. He is in a very, very difficult situation, because if he hoped to receive Tomahawks and being encouraged by EU and by some in the United States to continue fighting because Russia is supposedly collapsing, he has a big surprise that Russia is not collapsing, and it is his army that's collapsing. So if he accepts, he is a dead man, because the Banderovites, the right-wing nationalists who brought him to power, will not accept this. Most likely what's going to happen if he accepts the Trump-Putin deal is that he is going to be overthrown. If he accepts, and that also would mean that the military rule has to be stopped and elections held, and he has absolutely no chance of winning those elections, because he has antagonized the civilian population, tired of these endless mobilizations and grabbing men on the streets, and so forth. So he has a very, very narrow chance of surviving. Now, if he rejects it, he has at least a hope that his army can fight on for another few months, and then hopefully something would happen and the Europeans may find the money, or something will change in Trump's mind. In other words, his instinctive reaction would be, it seems, to hold on to power, not to accept anything, and hope for the best in the coming few months. And finally, my dear friends, I think that this is exactly what President Putin is counting on. He cannot accept Zelensky's regime in power, Because look, from the Russian point of view, what is to expect from Ukraine if there are no limitations put on its armed forces? 2 or 3 years will go by, Trump is going to retire, and another president will come. What is going to stop Zelensky or some other Ukrainian president to invite Raytheon to start building missiles on the territory of Ukraine? They will be known as Ukrainian ones. They would be not American ones or Taurus or some other ones, and attack Russia again. So from the point of view of a Russian president, any Russian president, they cannot afford to have the Bandera nationalist regime that can shoot into Russia at any day their missiles. Therefore, it seems to me that the Russian objective, Putin or Medvedev or any other, is to make sure Ukraine represents no military threat to Russia in the years to come. And that can only be achieved if there is a ironclad international treaty, which is unlikely in view of the European position, or by regime change. And that can only happen if Ukrainian regime falls on its own contradictions, or it is forced to fall by Russian military victory. So that's where we are, and we shall see and how right or wrong I was when the Budapest Summit happens. And on that note, my dear friends, I would like you to read my book, From Lenin to Putin, to subscribe to my channel, to put the likes if you do like it, and to write your commentaries. I try to answer every one of them. And I'll see you next time. Thank you. Goodbye.